Hi guys, so today I want to talk about a book called Small Feet by Aelth Faye. I received it as a ARC copy here this last week. It's a novella, Cinderella retelling. Absolutely stunning. Loved it. Think of it this way. What do you think would have happened if it turned out that Cinderella wasn't the only one with small feet? I mean, that's the whole idea behind this story, is that her feet behind the fairy tale, her feet are the only feet that fit into these small glass slippers, correct? What if there was a girl who also attended the balls, who found talking to other people to be socially awkward, kind of struggled with things, and so didn't spend a whole lot of time actually dancing on the dance floor, talking to any of the gentlemen there, talking to any of the girls, just kind of sequestered herself away, read books in the garden, um, and danced a couple of times, but was missing for large gaps of the balls, all three balls, right? And what if, say, this girl knew Cinderella? Her and Ella had grown up as childhood friends, but that Ella started having issues in her life because of her stepmother, and this girl felt, Jade is her name, felt sorry for Ella, but at the same time didn't feel sorry for her because Ella never tried to get herself out of the situation. Um, and I wouldn't say that she necessarily blamed Ella for it, but she didn't know what she was supposed to do if Ella wouldn't bother to help herself, correct? So then you have the prince chasing after this girl, and unfortunately for our character Jade, her dress is always similar in color to the dresses that Ella wears, but shabbier because her parents don't spend as much money or don't bother to buy her new dresses. She wears her sister's hand-me-downs because her sisters are prettier than her, is how it's described. But she sees the stepsisters, Ella's stepsisters, grab a fondue pot and are going to apparently pour hot fondue on Ella. And she intervenes and stops and tries to stop them, and they pour the hot fondue on her instead, get it all over her skirts. And the prince comes upon them, chases after Jade, and Jade hides in a closet, and he runs past, and then he sees Ella running down the stairs, and that's when she loses the shoe. So he thinks that this whole time he's chasing Ella through the castle, when in reality he's chasing Jade. Then, on top of this, he finds the glass slipper, and he starts going from house to house, putting this glass slipper on these girls. And Jade tries to get away from it. She decides she's going to go sit in the backyard, and no one will come get her. And they do come get her, and they make her. And the slipper fits on her foot. Now it doesn't fit perfectly. It's a little bit wider than her foot, and it's a little bit longer than her foot, but her foot fits into it. And without going any further, the prince declares, "This is the girl." And Jade is confused because she knows she's not the girl. She knows that she's not Ella, but she doesn't know what to do. And kind of what you kind of see here is that Jade is a little bit selfish at times, where she does get jealous. She's jealous of her sisters and the attention they get, and at one point during the balls, she decides that she's going to try and find an older gentleman to marry, so that way her future is secured. But she gives that up pretty quickly because she doesn't want to have to talk to these people, right? That's just not her thing. Well, then they get to get to the castle, and she has dinner with the king and queen, and they're all asking her about her life and her parents, and not once does anyone ask her how she got the gorgeous dresses, or where she got the slippers, or to procure the other to bring the other slipper. Nothing. And she, finally, feeling so badly, she goes to bed. She begs off early, goes to bed, has a headache, and the prince comes to talk to her, and he doesn't seem concerned that about who she is, but she does ask him if he would bring her friend Ella to the castle. And at this point, she's made the decision that she's going to ask Ella to come to the castle, and she's going to ask Ella to be her companion. It'll get Ella out of the situation that she's in, and at the same time, Jade won't have to lose face, and no one will find out that she lied, and she'll get to marry the prince, who's been very kind to her. And she met the prince before. She had ended up in a maze where she came upon the prince and his best friend talking, and they gotten, into a little bit of a tiff, and then his friend had taken off, and Jade had fallen and hurt herself, and so the prince had sat with her until she recovered, and then he walked her out of the maze and back to the ballroom, and they'd had a very candid conversation, and she had told him, you don't have to talk to me, you don't have to do this, I understand that you're trying to hide from all of these people, and he really did appreciate, her just being blunt, just being herself. So when the slipper fit, he didn't mind marrying her because she didn't simp after him like all of the other girls did. But his friend was upset, and she couldn't for the life of her figure out why his friend was upset. But his friend was upset and asked her about the dresses and asked her about the other shoe, and she started to get an inkling that maybe this friend knew more about Ella and what Ella had gone through than what he was telling anybody. When Ella showed up at the castle, and as soon as Jade saw her, she knew she couldn't take her place. She knew she couldn't lie anymore. And so she showed Ella all the dresses and told Ella, she was like, well, you're good enough at sewing. She was like, here is, one of my dresses they had made for me. Go ahead and alter it for yourself and you can wear it. And Ella and her looked enough alike. Their hair was similar in blonde color, and they're similar in stature. Jade was a little bit, heavier than Ella was. And so Ella made the alterations to the dress because Jade openly admitted she wasn't very good at sewing. Ella made the alterations to the dress and put it on, and then Jade requested that someone get the prince and have him meet her in the library. Or Jade did, I'm sorry, Jade requested someone have the prince meet her in the library, and she took Ella down there. And so then when he stepped into the library, he, saw Ella from behind, thought it was Jade, said something. Ella turns around, and Jade appears and says, she's who you danced with at the ball, not me. I'm not the same person. And surprisingly, the prince's response was, so, I can still marry you. But don't you want to marry for true love? And he was like, true love is fine. He was like, but we already announced that I was going to marry you. And if we announce, there'll be some confusion and you could get in trouble. And once again, the prince was being kind to her. And she told him that wasn't a big deal, that she didn't need him to guard her, that she would be fine. And so then, of course, he took Ella to go talk to the king and queen, and Jade, went back to her room because now she figures she's in disgrace. She found out that she lied. She, is probably going to get in trouble. No, and at one point she considered she was going to be a governess. Well, now she's like, well, no one's going to want a liar to teach their children, right? Then his friend shows up to her room, and it's been hours. Like, she's been in her room by herself past dinner time, and he shows up to her room, and he starts asking her questions, and he's like, well, why didn't you say anything? And she goes, I'll be honest. She said, the idea that the prince wanted to marry me and that I was going to get out of my house and that he was kind to me was something that I really appreciated. And then come to find out that this man had known Ella when they were children. Their parents had been friends, and he had spent some time with Ella as a child, and him and Ella had written to each other frequently growing up. And then her father died, and he got a brief note from her about that, and then he didn't hear from her until like 2 years ago when she sent him a letter telling him that she was going to run away from her stepmother and she needed help. And he promised to help her, but he didn't think it was as dire as it actually was. And so he decided he was going to come get her after he was done with university. And then the prince said he was going to go to England because this man and the prince went to university together. And so he put it off until the prince went to England, not realizing how, oh, he's going to be here for the balls. I'll take Ella then. He was the one that provided the dresses for Ella, and he was the one that provided the shoes for Ella, and basically it boiled down to he knew that Jade wasn't Ella, and that's why he had questioned her, and so then of course his question to Jade was, well, why did you tell? And she was like, originally I wasn't going to, but then Ella got here and I felt so bad and I just didn't want to be that person. And it really, and it was funny because he wasn't mad at her. He wasn't angry at her. He understood. Then her stomach growled and he realized that she was hungry and everyone had forgotten about her. So he took her down the stairs to the kitchen and got her food. Then the next morning, her maid comes in, gets her dressed, tells her that the king and queen want to see her. And so she goes down to one of the rooms where they're sitting, and she sits down there with them, and the king and queen are there, and Ella and the prince are there, and she goes through these series of questions again, and the queen wants to know, well, why did you lie? Well, why didn't you do this? Why didn't you do that? What are we supposed to do? And Ella and Jade was like, well, tell them that there was a mistake and that, you know, Ella's the real girl, and that wasn't what they wanted to do. The king and queen didn't want to do that because it would make them look bad. And and then Ella, you know, was like, well, tell them that Jade took my place on purpose to protect me, and then called me here as her companion, so that way we could then reveal that it was truly me to protect me from my stepmother. And then they talked. That was a great idea because it made Jade seem like a hero instead of a liar, and no one got tricked. And then they decided to come up with a punishment for the stepmother and the stepsisters. And the original punishment for the stepmother is like, well, we could put her in the dungeons, but they'll treat her awfully, and she is, you know, a high-ranking, you know, a noble woman. So then they were like, well, we could make her a servant, and then leave. And of course, that's when it boiled down to, well, Ella, what's going to happen to your house? Who's it actually belong to? And Ella was like, oh, well, it's mine, so it belongs to me. And I'm like, okay, so Ella could gift it to someone, could turn it into a school. At Jade's suggestion, she just turning it into a school for underprivileged girls, so they could learn skills. And she said we could put the stepsisters and the stepmother there as servants under the threat that if they don't work, they'll go to the dungeons. And then they were like, well, who's going to run a house with, you know, servants that don't want to do their job? And Ella was like, Jade could do it. And of course, at this point, Jade's like, well, I could teach. That's what I wanted to do in the first place. And so that worked up right out her alley. So Jade ends up at this school, and they're getting the school set up, and some of she's struggling a little bit because some of the merchants don't want to work with an unmarried woman, and the women in the area are afraid she's going to steal their husbands and their sons, and it's just all kinds of ridiculous until the prince's friend shows up, and it turns out that he likes Jade, he likes Jade, and he wants to pursue courting her, and offers to be the French teacher that she is looking for until she can find a proper French teacher, because he's from France. And he tells her that that'll give him the advantage to court her while he's there. And since his father is a merchant and he has to stay for the next year to strengthen ties between his father and the merchants here, the merchants will more likely be willing to work with her if he is along for the ride. And it ends up in this nice little bow of where they get to be together, and it is just so sweet. And I just loved the way this retelling was done. Like, you couldn't have asked for a better retelling. You just had it had a lesson, it had a moral, it had a character who went through amazing character development. Like, Jade really was, at the beginning of the novella, someone who was just like letting life happen to her, and she didn't care, and she was literally, she said several times, all she cared about was having a food over her head, or a roof over her head, and food to eat. Like, the girl really likes food, I get it. And so it just, she developed into someone who actually cared about those around her, and it was just absolutely amazing. I loved that story, and I hope you enjoy it too.